This video is sponsored by, no, I'm kidding. Welcome to r/prorevenge, where karma is a B and so are these a-holes. Laughing. Client tries to screw me by locking me out of my own system. Edit. Since so many people assume this happened in the States, I want to say that I'm from a small country in Europe. The laws and regulations here are different than in the States. We have a government agency here that has everything to do with registering companies, and they do keep track of who's who. If you are a serial startup guy who leaves nothing but burnt ashes behind you, you cannot do it here. You have to register the owner and members of the board of the company if there is one. If you have a prior history of failed companies or you've broken the law in some regards, you are blacklisted at that establishment. First post, so be gentle with me. I've worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manners of things from creating simple HTML sites to managing a big hotel complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day I was coding big-ish custom websites was a rental company. Now, I heard a lot of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was sharp as a tack, backstabbing, and convicting. He was a lawyer after all. So I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their homes for rent. Renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot. Nothing out of the ordinary here. So we made a pretty good deal on paper. We signed it, and I get started on the project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands suddenly that I show him progress only a week into the process. He wants to see the website font now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming, and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front end first, design and then program. I, being very young at the time and fairly naive, agreed to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as in amendum and start working on the design now. Now, the contract states I was given free rein of design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I make a fast draft in Fireworks. This is back when I was using a Macromedia product before the Abdode acquisition. Within 2 days, I show him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aims to please the customer and do just what he wants. I design a new layout with his new list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. So now the next 3 months go, a never-ending cycle where he's never happy with anything. Now, close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the backend. I point out that he himself changed the order in how the project was being done and demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the back-end as stated in the contract. He now turns on me and says, "Yes, the contract we both signed says you will have a working back-end to show me at the end of the month. If you do not honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism." Okay, I now have 12 days to do a backend for this site, so I get a friend to help me and we work tirelessly through the weekend and have a good base to work in 9 days. Mind you, this is a point he has only paid to security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, "Well, if you don't honor the contract, why should I?" What? "Finish XX work and I'll pay as per the contract." Remembering now all the warnings I've heard about this guy, I decided to add a special function to the code just to be safe. More on that later. So now it's the end of the month, and we have a front-end design he is okay with, a back-end that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and I still have 1 month left to finish everything else. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 512 gigabits per second upstream from the server, it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when I would be put on the productional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay, and a demonstration goes on. As I'm showing him the site, both front end and back end, I can see he's immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He's trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly, and his eye gleams with all the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyways, he now says it's too slow, this is wrong, that is wrong, blah blah blah.
I want you to put it up on my prod server and see how the speed is.
Okay, no problem. I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. Okay, I wait a few days and then I get an email from him where he includes a forwarded messages from a bank detailing the transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his prod server so he can take a look at it under beta his domain.tld. Then I send him an email stating that he can try the system with the supplied credentials. What he doesn't know is that I knew he's been fishing around for another programmer to do this project to
pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right.
So I knew he'd probably like to screw me. What I was also suspecting was that the email I sent me from the transaction proof was a fake, which ended up being prorevenge number 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was that if user X, his user, tries to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed in the configuration first, the system will first delete and purge the database and then remove all the small documents in the web root. Yes, a very small function. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the emails from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who has none of the project left? He does. prorevenge 2. Since it's considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and he goes under investigation by both the police and the bank lawyers. Number 3. I sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew he's now blacklisted from owning a company, as well as lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got 5% of what he paid in the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project, that is hardly anything. But the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. Holy... See, there's always this, rule in the workplace: don't mess with people who work on your tech. This is still true with, real life. Don't mess with people who work with your tech. Our next post is by Albeit Sore. My mother ruins an anti-vaxxer Karen and her cronies. First time posting to this subreddit. I decided to post after listening to a ton of r/h. You should listen to him too. Also, this story was a little too juicy not to post. There's a ton of setup for this one, so bear with me. Background. The subject of this story is my mother. For the sake of this story, I'll call her Amber. She's in her late 70s and works for a women's clothing store which caters specifically to older clientele. She's been working for this particular company for some 20 years now. The manager of the store is the absolute epitome of a Karen. So, let's call her Karen. Extremely short hair, entitled Chubby Cheeks, cheats on her husband, and a blatant backstabber. Because the store is staffed by mostly other older women, cliques tend to form. It's basically high school. Yes, older women can be that petty. And naturally, Karen has her own group of cronies. During periods where no one is in the store, there tends to be a lot of gossip. This is important for later. The assistant manager, let's call her Jackie, is one of Karen's lackeys, and she has her headway up Karen's... If Karen does something, then Jackie isn't far behind, etc. Amber is a bit of a ball buster, and she has zero tolerance for garbage in her personal life. Over the years, she tends to try to stay impartial when it comes to her work. However, because it's all about professionalism, she also has empathy, which is something that seems to be in short supply with these other women. It also helps that she's been the top seller in her district for some 10 years, despite working part-time. Karen and Jackie absolutely hate her for it. So much so that Karen routinely schedules her for hours which are not especially good. Despite this, though, Amber still has her loyal clientele, and she always comes up on top against the other sales associates in total sales almost every quarter. As expected, this naturally feeds a horrible feedback loop with Karen and Jackie. When COVID hit, the company decided to cut all commissions for sales associates. The commission was one of the main reasons why Amber endured Karen and Jackie's BS while she made only slightly above the state's minimum wage. With the commission, she could double or even triple that amount on good days. According to her, no other real retailer in the area offers this kind of system, and it's pretty unlikely that the company will reinstate it even after COVID ends. Along with the cut in wages, the store was also forced to decrease the amount of hours they could offer to their associates. Karen took this as a way to essentially bar Amber from working at the store. While other associates were getting 8 to 10 hours a week, Amber would see maybe 6 if she was lucky, and there would be times of low customer traffic. Karen could get away with this because the district manager is also in her pocket. Along with the reduced hours and the removal of commissions, the store naturally had a mandatory mask policy for all employees and customers. Karen and her lackeys would often crap and moan about how unnecessary this was because, according to them, COVID is a hoax, and wearing masks makes you subservient to the government. There were a few incidents where Karen would let people without masks into the store despite the state and company mandates. Amber refuses to rock the boat, however, so when this would happen, she would go in the back of the store and stay as far away from these people as possible. During this period in time, a friend of the family and a good friend of Amber's passed away due to complications from COVID. The funeral was set for a time when Amber was scheduled to work, so she called out that day. Karen and Jackie attacked Amber and the decreasing, claiming that she might have caught the flu or been in bad health, and that Amber was feeding into a lie. Oh, how nice it must have been to live such a privileged life. Not long after, a few of the store's loyal clients also passed away from COVID, and still Karen and Jackie, along with their cronies, maintained their narrative in the most vindictive way possible. Every time someone died, it must have been because of bad life choices or bad health. Never was it attributed to the global pandemic that was claiming thousands of people a day. According to Karen and her cronies, it's always when Amber decides to go to the services or support the deceased in any way. She would hear snide remarks regarding how she was supporting a hoax. Yet sympathy really wasn't a thing for these people. Some of these customers were regulars who've been coming to that particular store for years, and so now those groupies would relent on these points. Recently, the COVID restrictions have started to lift, and many of the clientele and employees have gotten their vaccine. This includes submitting paperwork to show you have indeed obtained a vaccine or a note from a doctor explaining why you can't have one. Not Jackie or Karen, though. To them, getting the vaccine would be like pumping poison into their veins. Instead, they decided to use a fake COVID white cards. Those things exist. With their information, effectively forging the documents. Amber, however, has suggested multiple times that they just get the vaccine because it's something that is mandated by the company.
All employees must get vaccines when they're available, and
Given that almost all the employees are over the age of 60, they've been eligible for the shots for months now. Seriously? Recently, Amber had an emotional conversation directly with Karen where she expressed her concern for her. I just want you and your family to be safe, so please get the vaccine. Karen responded with her normal, snide attitude, of course. A few days later, however, Karen sent a text message mentioning that she had finally got the vaccine. She didn't, obviously. Amber replied that it was great and she was happy for her. Karen just replied with a gif of some guy throwing up the middle finger. Bruh. This was the beginning of the end for Amber. The incident. During one of her shifts, Amber overheard Karen and Jackie discussing how Amber was a moron and a sheep who bought the story of how Karen had taken the vaccine. During this same shift, Amber was working with a customer in the back, and some woman came into the store and sold a couple of items of clothing, probably totaled out to be $100 at most. Now, it was company policy that during all shifts, there was at least 2 employees in the store, and during this particular stretch of time, Jackie was the only other person in the store. According to the video cameras, Jackie was up in the front of the store playing with her phone when this woman came in. Normally, if someone steals items from the store, the protocol is to avoid confronting them and instead just call security after they left the store. This is to mainly avoid lawsuits and to protect the employees should these people choose to get violent. It has happened in the past, unfortunately. That evening, Amber received a call from Karen telling her she was on probation pending the investigation for allowing this woman to steal from the store. Given that the company's policy regarding theft, this made really no sense. At this point, that Amber truly decided she had enough. Eventually, this probation led to Amber's dismissal, and the official reasoning was fairly vague. The Revenge. One thing that I forgot to mention, a few years ago, Ambrose asked me to teach her how to record things on her phone, and luckily we live in a single consent state. As such, Amber had recordings of these women backstabbing her and gossiping about rather scandalous things dating back for years. She had gathered quite the collection because you never know when you need to cover your own butt. Over the years, Amber has gone to HR to no real avail, even with her recordings. Well, HR is meant to protect the company, not the workers. Whatever it may be, because they're also in the pocket of Karen or that they just don't care remains to be seen. The HR department works directly under the district manager. Amber is also really good at keeping any paperwork and proof of these visits, including some recordings. She also recorded a call where she was fired. Amber has a ton of very local clients who are pretty distraught when they learned of her dismissal. One client in particular runs a column at one of the major newspapers from the nearby city. We'll call her Cassie. Since Amber was a part-time worker, she didn't really have much of a leg to stand on legally when it came to claiming a wrongful dismissal claim by legal means. However, that did not mean she didn't have any kind of recourse. She decided to attack the program from multiple fronts. Amber completed some of the greatest hits from her recording collection and had me email them off to the corporate offices of the company, specifically the CEO, CTO, and basically every member of the board of directors. I fired a couple bursts off to anyone who had any power that I could find, along with those recordings. She wrote an email how Karen, Jackie, and their group of cronies all refused to get the vaccine and has falsified their vaccine documents to pass the company standards. Cassie then put Amber in touch with a columnist for the newspaper, and they got a couple copies of the recordings, the text messages, and a dismissal phone call. They also did an interview, which was for an article and a TV slot in the local news. Amber discussed the commission cuts, clear favoritism, lack of intervention by HR, forged documents, company policies, the incident, etc. Basically anything relevant to paint these women in a terrible light. Among some of these recordings were bits of gossip that included conversations regarding Karen's various boyfriends over the years. She was married, and Amber also wrote an anonymous email to the husband and included some of the recordings. The fallout. Crap hit the fan pretty fast, as you can imagine. Karen, Jackie, and the district manager and a couple of the cronies were immediately fired and put under investigation for forging documents. While forging a vaccine card isn't something too serious, it could lead to some pretty hefty fines. There's no specific law against forging the vaccine white card. However, because the white card contained the government seal, well, you can just imagine how illegal that may be. Let's say that the FBI have stepped in on this one. One of the recordings featured Karen admitting to using the forged cards. After the article and TV slot ran on the local news, the CEO reached out to Amber formally to apologize for the behavior of HR, the district manager, Karen, and Jackie. She even went so far as to offer Amber a raise, but Amber declined because she found a job that actually paid a fair wage and let her do her work on her own time. The real beef for the CEO and the board was the fact that their employees were breaking the company policy for a store that exclusively catered to older women, regarding a virus that tends to kill older people. They caught some heavy public backlash for this. Karen's husband seems to have separated from her after finding out about her infidelity. Whether or not this will lead to divorce remains to be seen. The best part for Amber, many of her clients started coming to her new store, and again she's kicking A as one of the best sales associates. Thanks for reading. I know this one was a bit long. Edit. Thanks for the support, guys. I didn't really expect this post to blow up as fast as it did. I thought I would address a couple of concerns that people have noted in the comments section. I know parts of this story seem far-fetched, but remember, much of this has come through a second-hand account, though I did listen to the recordings and help my mom with some of the revenge. Yes, my mom is in her 70s and she still works. She does it for a few reasons. She's on a fixed income and the extra income helps. And she likes to be active and enjoys working with customers. My brother and I do give her extra income, but she only takes so much because she's really prideful. She's also one of my most active people I know and has a prolific social life than I or any of my friends and family members do. No, I won't link the article because it'll break the community guidelines. My mom's name is in there and so are a few people involved, as well as the company itself. That said, you could probably find it on Google quickly enough. The contract my mother was under is classified as at-will employment. Basically, this means that the employer or the employee can terminate the contract at any time for any reasons outside the usual suspects: hate crimes, racial issues, etc. We did talk with a lawyer, and this particular aspect will make it difficult to fight the company and the termination since they gave such a vague reasoning for the firing. My mother also just didn't want to deal with a lengthy legal battle just to get back at a few idiots. The manager had it out for my mom from the beginning. I think it was due to their differing political and social views. My mom is a very outspoken liberal, and this woman is by a numbers religious conservative. Even before Trump, there was a lot of friction there. The way I worded things may have been vague regarding the conversations in the recordings. With single consent laws, you can record a conversation and one party is aware of the recording. In this case, that party will be my mother. These women were so egotistical that they would often gossip about stuff right out on the store floor while talking with my mother as almost an aisle. These recordings originally for documenting all the abuse that my mother endured. My mother was approached for a promotion multiple times while working for this company. She just didn't want the extra responsibility, nor did she want to work full-time. Instead, it just gave her raises, but because the state was also raising their minimum wage for the past couple of years, these raises have become almost irrelevant. The FBI investigation is ongoing, and as some have mentioned, it could be jail time involved for some of these women. While that is indeed true, it's doubtful that it will happen, given that only Karen was recorded saying that she was using a forgery. I should also point out that I'm not sure how they obtained the forgery or whether or not they made it themselves. That would be impressive if they did. One thing I should also note is that my mother never really harbored any lasting ill will against Karen or Jackie, or really any of the others, until the past year. The reason was primarily because she could see that they had some kind of humanity in there. Obviously, even the Karens of the world will have shades of gray, and my mom can be forgiving to a fault when it comes to people she has known for a long time. Thank you all so much for watching. Please comment what you think about that video down in the comments, like and subscribe, and peace out.